Sadhguru for using his position in the world and people knowing him to speak out for soil. Think about it for a moment. You're talking to a heavy-duty soil scientist who's into soil, but most people are not into soil. They call it dirt, it's the stuff that gets under your fingernails, that's not their thing. But what Sadhguru is saying is 100% right. Soil is where it's at, and not just because I'm a soil scientist. Why are we here? Well, obviously we're here to support it, but why are we able to be here? Did anybody eat in the last 2 days? Yeah. And what was that grown in? Almost always it's grown in soil. Forget the hydroponics for a moment, but that's a variation on it. Almost all of the world is dependent on soil to grow things. And it gets more complicated. It's also you're dependent on it for the water cycle. Who here has been to one of the scrub natural areas in South Florida? Scrub is a weird word, but it's a name for one of the natural areas. Good, we've got one.
She's here.
And we got two. I don't know why it's in the back of my head. So what you see in a lot of the scrub areas, that's usually on the highest ground in Florida, you'll see a lot of bare white sand. It just can't support a lot of vegetation on it. It has very specific things, all of which are very water adapted. Now, who has walked in forests anywhere in the world? Probably almost everybody. And if you kick it or dig a little bit, did you see sort of organic-y looking stuff? Yeah. Often it'll hold some moisture. So there's your two end points. Heavy organic, or who's been out in the Everglades? Well, we got a couple. Did anybody get out of the boat and get in the water and sink in a little bit? Yeah, we got, no. Alligators, no. Well, do it if you get an opportunity, do. And you'll sink in a little bit. That is organic soil that is almost 100% organic. Very little mineral soil in that. That's the other extreme, kind of like the forest side. So who cares? Well, the reason that you care, let's talk about water cycle first. As rain falls down, what two things can it do? And I'll give you a hint, it's directional. It can go that way, or it can go that way. If it goes that way, meaning it goes over the surface of the soil, what's happening? Flooding, bingo, got it on the first pop. Carrying off nutrients, carrying off pesticides, carrying off all sorts of things that you don't really want in your water bodies. And what is it not doing? It's not recharging the aquifer. It's not recharging your water supply either for roots of trees or for people or for whoever is using the water. So you want as much infiltration as possible and as little surface runoff as possible. What makes that happen? If you go back to the scrub areas where you got the bright white sand with nothing on it, one of the weird things that will happen is at the beginning of a rainstorm, that water will bead up on the surface. It doesn't sink in. It's called water repellency. It's a weird phenomenon. If you have organic matter there, that tends not to happen. You get much better infiltration into the soil, and you're putting that water where it does the most good and does the least harm. So, soil erosion. Everybody's heard of soil erosion. A lot of people probably know about the dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico, where there's a big area it's dead because it's low oxygen. And why is it low oxygen? Well, it's low oxygen because there's a lot of soil erosion from the Midwest that comes down the Mississippi River, comes out into the Gulf of Mexico, and the organic load in there then starts decomposing. It sucks the oxygen out of the water. And if you're a fish, that's not cool. You don't like that. You die. So you don't want soil. That's just one example of why you don't want soil erosion. What does organic matter do? When you look at this, at sand, there's very little holding it together. If you dig down a little bit here, we're probably at maybe 2%. 2% organic matter. The dark stuff, that's what you want to be seeing. And what do you need to get there? Well, you need source of organic material, so you need to be growing on it, something on it. And how can you lose it? You lose it by oxidation. The stuff, it'll either literally burn, or most of the time it doesn't burn anymore, but it used to in the Everglades. It oxidizes microbially. If it's got a little bit of moisture on it and sunlight and it heats up, it'll just decompose away. And it's always doing that. It's a balance of accumulating and decomposing. What Sadhguru is pushing us to do, and pushing us to push our politicians, is make the conditions for that organic matter to keep increasing. Grow things on it, shade, moisture, and keep that in good shape. And then there are other things like don't use too much pesticides, don't use too much fertilizer, all those things that go with it. But the primary things is protect that organic matter. Very cool that somebody whose principal thing is spirituality is focused on probably the most central part of our basis for being alive on the planet. And is there a link to climate change? Yes, very much so. And it's one of the things about soil organic matter is that it's tied into feedback loops a lot. So here's one that's a big one. Will that decomposition of organic matter be faster or slower if you warm the temperature? Faster. I'm hearing no slowers and a lot of fasters. Exactly right. And what happens to that organic matter when it decomposes? Turns into CO2. Where does the CO2 go? Into the atmosphere. What does the CO2 do? Increases the global warming. Now we have a feedback loop that is very unhelpful. So you want to try to protect that organic matter. In fact, one of the big reserves of carbon that we look for to suck carbon out of the atmosphere is soil organic matter. There's actually a lot of carbon in the world soils. So anything that one can do to protect that organic matter is helping reduce global warming, and in turn doing more protection for the soil organic matter. So kudos to Sadhguru for being on to this. Kudos to you.
The magic of soil is it turns death into life. Depleted soils will not quench the fire of hunger. Unquenched hunger can burn the very world. This is a generational responsibility. Save soil, let's make it happen.